Anatomy 5. Okay, well, formally, hello, welcome. Last anatomy session today. You made it. Let's go around and do a quick check-in, names, pronouns, and just like, how are you doing today? Or anything you want to share. And that way also Christine can get to know your names and you can get to know Christine a little bit better. So, who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Ethan. Feel pretty good. A little tired at the end of that last set. 15-minute break. I'm good again.
Good.
Ready to go.
Awesome. Okay.
Those say no pronouns and I feel pretty good. I started working on my oil painting. I got the sketch pen and I got the other painting and I'm really excited for it. It's kind of like all I want to do right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice.
She, her. I'm doing good. I'm kind of dealing with some figure out car things. My sister's car broke down and trying to give it to her, and I'm kind of like feeling like I don't want to give her my car. I'm gonna be all stressed, but try to like, kind of detach from that and figure out. No, it's gonna be.
All right. Goodness.
She, her, super tired, but otherwise good. She, her, overall good. I was very tired this morning. I think I'm still tired, but because we moved a little bit, at least
Joe more movement.
I mean, I'm sure we will during the Aggie, so we good.
Well, today's a whole. I know. Today's just a different day, but we can try
It's
some.
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Hi, Christine. Her. Great day, beautiful. I always say, blue sky, beautiful. Great day.
Absolutely. This is your first time with this group, right?
Second.
Oh, second. Oh, great.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
go. Oh, okay, cool.
And I have one more.
One more. You go. Awesome.
Well, have my makeup done.
Okay.
Did you already teach out?
No.
You're teaching out that's how.
No.
Okay.
December.
Gotcha.
December.
Yeah, there's so many different times where so many people are. I'm Mackenzie, she, her. I say I feel pretty good today. My word when we were finishing was sunny, so I'm right there with blue skies and sunny, so yeah, pretty good.
All of them. Good. Better after the sequencing class is super informative. So glad that we feeling good from that. Reading and thank you guys. I wasn't feeling great this morning. Not feeling so much better.
Yeah.
Jake, Ethan, doing okay. Trying to working full time and the teacher training is consumed a lot of my time and like way behind some of my other life stuff that we could do.
Jacob and Tim, and I really feel like an archaeologist just discovering my own self right now. You know, like I'm excavating slowly, like getting there. And that's like really, I keep on thinking about what Sarah said, like constantly just, like she said a couple of weeks ago, like yoga, the process of yoga for her is always like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And that's been something I've just been harkening back to.
Wow. Awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. We're just doing a checking with names for Christine.
I'm Joshua.
And sleep has been pretty consistent. Guess we're in the home stretch now for me, which stay the course. Yeah, just kind of going from there. Finishing her out. Whatever's next, honestly, I'm kind of just trying to contain my excitement, but excited for hopefully what So kind of like, all right, let's really soak in the information, take it in, and then patience. So life is really good. Honestly.
Figuring out who we're missing. Christina and Al. I think.
Christina's sick. I don't know.
Bummer. Okay. I'll do a little check-in because I had an aha moment and I love this idea of 2 steps forward, 1 steps back. I woke up and literally one of the first, I woke up and I was just immediately anxious. And so one of the first thoughts on my mind was like, you haven't done anything wrong. It's okay. You don't need to be anxious. And then I followed it up with, well, maybe you have done something wrong. You probably have. Also, it's okay. Yeah. And sure enough, I get a text like within 30 minutes being like, hey, somebody messed up this thing. And I was like, that's me. And that's like my big, it's something that I'm working on so much with this thing of like feeling like I'm in trouble. Like I cannot handle it. And, so all morning I've been like, you know what? It was an honest mistake. You apologized. You're going to make it right. It's okay. Move on. You don't have to make it a big deal. And then every 5 minutes, like, it's okay. You don't have to make it a big deal. You don't have to make it. And I'm like, okay, I obviously am. And so I taught my class this morning and I went home to eat and did not eat before I came back here with y'all. And I had this thought, I was like, the one thing that I really don't want to happen today is I don't want to spiral out of control. And then I was like, okay, so that's the worst case scenario for you. The worst case scenario is that you spiral out of control and the other party is like, you did this on purpose, you're awful, which isn't gonna happen. And so I was just like, okay, if the worst case scenario is that you spiral and you say like you have a panic attack or something, it's like, that's okay. Like you have survived that hundreds of times in life thus far. If that happens, it'll happen, you'll feel the things, and then you'll move on and you'll one day be feeling stronger again, and that's all okay. And so just this idea, especially like Josh said, like you're in this home stretch in the program and like starting to put together the sequence or wrapping up anatomy and, you know, just you have survived 100% of the hard things in your life so far, and whatever big feelings come up in the last several weeks here, if they come up, then you can handle them too, and you're awesome. That's basically all I wanted to say. So, all right. So today, our last anatomy session, we're really all of the poses, and you don't even need to pull out the worksheet. I kind of doubt we're gonna get to it. We might. It's just gonna be a wait and see situation, depending on how long this takes for us to get through this other content. Because all of the things that would be in the worksheet for anatomy number 5 are poses from spine, hips, and surrender. And so I want to take some time really talking about the other anatomical applications of the spine and the hips and the purpose of this idea of surrender, which I'm so glad you just did sequencing. That's such good timing. And then if we get to wrap up some of these like anatomical movements with some of those poses, we certainly can. Sound good? All right. Christine, have you done all the other anatomy sessions? Well, not that it wouldn't be a big deal if you hadn't, but I'm just curious. All right, and I'm gonna move this around a bit. I forgot my charger, so I just want to make sure I get this recorded. So that being said, if you all need to move to see me or the board at any time, please do. This looks like a balloon. It is the spine. I can tell. I'm like looking at it like.
Yeah, Mackenzie and Maggie kind of had like a debate over if it was spine or balloon.
And you said both, so.
Okay. Oh, you know, I scrolled down too far. Okay, we're gonna come back to this balloon later. I was like, I don't think this is the top of my notes. It's not. So, one concept that I want you to be aware of are two words called proprioception. Proprioception. And interoception. These both have to do with our relationship with our body, but they are kind of two opposites here. So does anybody, have you heard of the word proprioception before? Yeah, who wants to take a stab at it?
The one that can't see your body, but aware of where it's at.
Yeah, aware of where your body's at in space. And so we see lack of this a lot of times in beginners because, or not in beginners, in yoga, because people walking in off of the street and they're like, all right, well, I mean, yes, in beginners, but also in other classes. And you're like, okay, your knee's pointing in this direction. And it's like pointed in the total opposite direction. And you might like cue it again and again and it's just like not like they're not connecting the dots. So like, oh, my knee is not pointed where I think it is. And that is a gift that yoga helps us to strengthen, is this proprioception, this awareness of where our body is in space. Why is that a gift? Why is it? It's important for healthy alignment, because if we're completely unaware that our knee is knocking in Warrior Two, or that we're forcing our hips to face a certain direction, it can increase the likelihood of injury if we're completely unaware of what's going on. It's also a gift because it does help us to be more embodied, right? That's why we're putting so much emphasis on saying your feet, your hands, instead of those hands, those fingers. This second word, interoception. Let's heard of this one. So yeah, you know it. You want to take a stab at it?
I think, well, I'll take a step. So I think it's like sensation, like feeling sensations inside your body.
Yes, yeah, like sensations inside your body. So this can show up in a lot of different ways. It might be like my niece struggles with interoception, and so like she will not know that she needs to pee. We have to like set a timer. It's like, it's been 4 hours, it's been 7 hours, it's been 8, honey, you have to. She's like, but I don't feel like I need to. And it's like, well, why don't you just go see? And then she's always like, whoa, I didn't know I could pee. In yoga, it can manifest itself. Did I tell you all the story of the woman who asked, what is sensation?
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm just to kind of recap, I was teaching Yin, and I was setting up the class, and I was talking about, if it's too much sensation. And she's like, I'm sorry, what's this word sensation? Like, I don't understand. And that's a really far extreme of this interoception, where I'm like, it's the things that you feel in your body. It's, am I stretching enough that I actually feel like I'm impacting my body, or is it way too much and I feel like I'm causing injury? So this is where, when we're talking about interoception, a lot of what types of cues are going to be based around helping people strengthen their interoception. Operative, yeah, those sensational based cues. Which is going to be twofold. It's going to contribute, just like proprioception, to the embodiment of themselves and feeling present in their bodies, helping keeping them grounded right here, right now. And also, it's going to help to mitigate the risk of injury, because if you're paying attention, sometimes I'll ask people, they might come up to me afterwards and be like, hey, my elbows do this in this pose, is that safe? And I'm like, well, does it feel okay? Or do you feel like, you're hurting them? And they're like, I have absolutely no idea. I don't know if this feels okay or not. I don't know if it feels like it's causing injury. And so, which is, again, is super, super normal. And so to just continuously remind them of like, hey, in this pose, you might feel an opening through the hamstrings here. You might feel compression of the abdomen here, like giving them this language and kind of telling them, you know, this is what you might be feeling, or and again, because it's like you might be feeling it and also you may not. But it's like giving them hints to an answer and being like, here's something that you might be feeling right now. Go inside and look within. And now if you're able to identify it, next time you do this pose, maybe you're going to be able to identify it again. Maybe over time, it's going to be easier to identify these things and not have to pour so much energy into it.
And also, with like pain signals that your body's giving you, like if you're getting stabbing sensations, maybe you should ease out of it a little bit.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So discomfort is normal in yoga. Things that are our body's warning signs to back out of a pose would be stabbing pain. What else can you think of? Pinching, cramps.
Like your face tightens.
Oh,
breathing,
that's a
if you
good
can't
one. Yeah.
relax your jaw.
Yeah, you can't, your face is tight, maybe you're not breathing. And you may at that point be causing injury and you may not. And all of these, actually, that's true. Like sometimes we feel pain and are not causing injury, but it is definitely that line that I do not want to cross and risk. And also, to me, there's not, I'm like, I don't want to, even if I'm not causing injury, I don't want to be in pain. Like, so can we not do that as a society? That like no pain, no gain, actually. Yeah, Reva.
This just made me think of, yeah, in athletics, it almost goes to that extreme where people are so used to pushing through pain that you get disconnected with that sense in your body of like discomfort versus pain. So you might know or feel like you know what your body is telling you, but a lot of times if you've been taught to kind of ignore that
Just push it
or
farther.
push through it, or like it can be so difficult to figure out where that line is.
That's how I differentiate between this is like a muscular stretch and this is sensation in a joint type of a thing.
Yeah.
So like, are you stretching out your thigh muscle or are you feeling like tingling or something in your knee? It's like, yeah, no, these are very different and have a lot of different implications.
So let's play around. Let's stand up.
Oh,
sorry,
Say
sorry.
something really quick.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I just learned this, I have nerve issues and my limbs will fall asleep pretty easily. And I learned that you know this doesn't like pain, it is causing damage to your body if your limbs fall asleep and it lasts for more than 5 minutes. So if you're in a pose and something falls asleep and it like recovers, you're good. But if it stays asleep too long, then don't do that pose or don't do it like that.
That's
do it differently.
super good to know.
That's
Thank you.
really-
That's always my issue when I'm like doing mantra meditations where I'm like, I've been sitting in the same, I'm like, my leg is asleep, but I'm always like, it's fine, it'll just suck when you stand up. So thank you for, by the way, Kirtan, Friday night, if anybody wants to join. Yeah,
Friday night, yeah.
Friday night, if you want to come. And if you also need to donate less than what's on there, just let me know. Be happy to have you. But anyway, that was off topic, but that's where I always feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's stand up. If I would spread around the room a little bit, have some distance between you and other people. And you might also be facing away from each other. You might be facing walls. If you're comfortable, close or soften your eyes. Without moving anything, think about your left pinky toe. Think about, just notice, bring awareness to your right kneecap. Notice the palm of the right hand. Notice the back of the neck. eyes softened or closed. Lift up your left arm out away from you. Lateral abduction and pause here. And let yourself reside. It's gonna start to get heavy, and you're like, it already has. Reside in the sensation for every time your mind wanders, come back to how heavy your left arm feels. Gentle breaths. Slowly lower the arm. We could hold it there much longer, but we won't. Now notice where you're breathing into the torso, if you're going into the belly, the ribs, or the chest. Now, that one is super tricky, right? Because as soon as we start to watch the breath, it has a tendency to change on us. So now remember the last breath that you took and see if you can put it on repeat on a little loop and do that same breath over and over again. See if that's easier to get a read on where it's fallen, how deep it is, how fast or slow it is. Now notice your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10. If you feel comfortable keeping eyes softened or closed, take the feet out wider and let the eyes being closed be part of that, right? That you don't have the visual cues. And let me reframe. We're gonna do like a ragdoll. So sorry, I should have said like just a little bit wider. Good. Now, when you feel ready, bend into the knees, let the torso fold over. You can do whatever you want to with the arms here. Keep a bend in the knees and let the head hang heavy. And can you visualize and go deep into all of the spaces in the spine, all the spaces between the vertebrae getting longer? And at this point, even with a bend in the knees, you probably start to feel more sensation and stretch in the hamstrings. We're going to continue to hold, breathe through it. Over time, if it were my body at this point, I'd be like, my hamstrings are the only thing that exists anymore. What about the bottom of the feet? How do they feel? What about the shins? What about the softness or lack of softness in the neck? The hamstrings are probably still talking, but now they're a part of the chorus and not doing a solo. Release your hands. Let's find a halfway lift. Tune into the core, hugging the spine and the sacrum. Forward fold. Let's do that again. Inhale, standing halfway lift. Tune into the core as quick as you can. Exhale, release, forward fold, right? The pace changes things. Again, inhale, halfway lift. Feel the core, exhale, release. One more time, tune in as fast as you can. Inhale, lift up, feel it. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, extended mountain, arms overhead. Deep breath in, feel the rib cage broaden on all 360 degrees. And then relax the hands down. We're gonna do some breath of joy. please, if you feel the need to at any time, open your eyes and draw more alertness. I'm interested to see how this eyes softened or closed might impact the feeling of balance and this idea of proprioception, right? You've all got, looks like plenty of space around you. Okay, so when you inhale, bring arms forward, then out, then up, exhale. In, forward, out, up, exhale. Good, keep going. If your numbers were pretty far down there on the energy scale, maybe you slowly start to build the speed. And then with eyes softened or closed, notice, think about where the arms are in space around you. Picture the whole room around you. Last 3. And when you're done, slowly come back to standing. Eyes stay softened or closed to your comfort level. And now see what parts of the body stick out to you that are feeling really engaged, that are feeling worked. You're feeling energy or sensation there. These are usually the easier ones to locate, right? That, ow, I put my hand on a hot stove, pull it off. Your brain working with your nervous system there. Now start to look for parts of the body that feel less sensation and remember that they exist. Maybe there's sensation there, but it wasn't as loud. Before opening your eyes, see if you can picture the room around you, where your body is in the room. And when you're ready, flutter the eyes back open. How do y'all feel? Did you all? So I'll say this, stay where you are or come back to your seat. You can stay standing and keep moving, stretch things out, or you can return to a seat. Did anybody notice anything?
When you told me to focus on my feet and shins, I heard a little voice in my head saying, I love you. So I thought it was my shins and my feet. And then, yeah, my shins are like, this is my favorite pose.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you know that before
No.
about your shins?
I didn't, I've never had a conversation.
I love that. Cool.
When you were saying to feel things in your body that you don't normally feel, I was trying to like see where my ears are. And I was like, I don't know if you just don't have a lot of nerves there, but I was like, unless I like touch my ears, like they kind of don't exist. And I don't know. I sometimes like since I have piercings, like I'll feel that. Like there's sensation when there's like things wonky or things pulling on them, but otherwise, I don't really feel my ears.
That's funny because there's a lot of pressure points right there. You can have a lot of sensation in your ears, behind your ears, in front of your ears.
Right here.
Everywhere around your ears. This is like a really big hit point for massage.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, and I don't usually, I know I'm like, I don't think I usually feel mine unless
Yeah,
they're
well, your
itchy.
glasses are sitting on your ears. Like, can you feel that?
That's, now that you said it, I can,
Right,
but
and
before
that's-
I know, I was like, I don't
Well,
feel
and
anything
also,
in my
like, I
ears.
don't know if with glasses, because they're like, if they sit on your face all the time, like, do you feel like it's just like, you don't even, you're not even aware of it?
You get used to it.
Mo, you get used to it, and then at some point you're like, oh my gosh, get off of my face.
And then when you take them off, you're like, oh, goodness, now you're back.
Yeah,
Oh, my nose hurts.
yeah, thanks for sharing. That gives me another idea, Lotus.
In relation to the sensation in your
Mhm.
I only felt it in my left palm, and I was like, brain, that's the wrong palm. And I was like, I kind of like tried to imagine that there was light or like, because I do yoga teacher a lot.
Mm.
I was like imagining trying to grab the energy that was right here into my right palm, but just was not working. I was like, fine, I'll just stay with my left palm then. Okay.
Yeah.
What's calling to you? Yeah.
I could feel the blood flow after we did the Breath of Joy, just like that tingling kind of warming sensation, which is like, I don't know, you don't usually feel that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I like how when you said to bring awareness to different parts of the body, like, I don't know if this is also a blood flow thing, but I've been kind of conditioned, like, in different therapies and stuff, like, I have tingling sensations in those places once I bring my awareness to them. So then I'm able to kind of like more control what's happening in those places because I'm thinking about it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that, see, like all of this stuff, your body is not different than it was 20 minutes ago, but like drawing our awareness to these things can be so informative. Actually, I'm working on a writing project, and I was writing about when I was a teenager. I was in a very, very bad long-term situation, but I had been keeping it a secret. And at some point, I just mentally checked out, and I was just like, whatever, this is my life now, I guess. And I got super sick. And I never put this together until I was writing about it a couple nights ago that like, oh, my body was so intelligent and basically like throwing up all the red flags and warning signs to be like, hey, something is massively wrong here and Erica isn't doing anything about it. So like, but like my body did not desert me, you know? And I think about that now because I've been very, very sick for the last like 3 or 4 weeks. I'm feeling much better now actually, but and kind of reframing that and being like, interesting, especially since it was such a mysterious, like doctors don't know what's wrong. There's not really any like rhyme or reason to it, just like a random thing that popped up, and trying to reframe that of like, okay, now how can I use that? Is my body once again trying to get my attention and those warning signs? And of course, because I have the knowledge that we do as yoga teachers, that it's like, is there some third chakra stuff going on? But yeah, so this awareness that you can help lend to your students, that you can give to them, that they can take off of the mat, is going to be huge for recognizing like, oh, you know, yeah, maybe that sensation isn't good. Maybe I'm pushing myself too far there. Or it kind of might be the inverse of that. Because when we can start to be like, oh, pain versus discomfort. And a lot of times people are just like, I don't want either one of them, right? Of course, we want things that feel good and that we like, and we don't want to do chair pose or whatever it is. But you sit through chair pose for 5 to 7 breaths and you're like, I did it. And I didn't die. And like, it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't painful. And so at a certain point, you might start to rewire the brain through asana of saying like, oh, that's uncomfortable, but it's not painful. It's a lot of sensation, but you know, I don't think I need to back out of it today. I think that that's actually a sensation that I can tolerate. And then eventually that discomfort and that yumming and yucking that we can do becomes more neutral, and it becomes, oh, wow, that's a lot of sensation. And it's not this good or bad that then we can take out into the rest of our lives where it's like, all right, you know, here's something that initially it's maybe like, okay, I feel really uncomfortable. I don't want to have this hard conversation. So maybe I'm not going to have this hard conversation. Maybe I'm going to find my way out of it or something. And then over time, when we're learning these lessons through our body of pain versus discomfort versus just neutral sensation, that it's like, okay, here's this thing that maybe in the past I would have labeled as a bad or negative emotion and that I would have run away from, but instead, how can I approach it with more neutrality, that it is a thing. It's a thing. And you take it, what am I trying to say? You take away some of its power over you. Yeah. So proprioception and interoception. Intero, inner kind of, if that's helpful. Okay. I was like, we'll have plenty of time. That was my first note of a lot. So, my second miscellaneous thing, and then after this, we're going to be more focusing on like actual body parts that are going to weave in together more nicely. But my second miscellaneous thing is joint constraints and range of motion. So our range of motion means how far when you extend your elbow, how far does it go? As we've seen in the past, mine hyperextends a little bit, whereas other people might stop here or more than me. That's our range of motion. And because we're yoga teachers, and when you start teaching yoga and you ask people like, oh, what are you hoping for out of your practice today? 90% of those answers are going to be like, I need more flexibility. I'm really stiff. I can't touch my toes. Maybe I shouldn't be here because I can't touch my toes and I'm really inflexible. And that's when you're like, you're in the right place, because yes, we will approach, we will definitely influence flexibility, but it is not the goal of yoga like a lot of people seem to think that it is. So that said, there's a lot of a stigma around flexibility and lack of flexibility in the body. There are 5 things that can impact our range of motion. The first one is bone compression. We've talked about this before. This is where I'm pretty neutral actually, but some people, when they point their toes, their foot is way down here, but then when they flex, it doesn't come back as far. And the opposite, where some people don't point their toes as much, but they can flex their foot really far back, right? Like that is because of the shape of the bones where they meet at the joints, and just bone hits bone, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's just your body, and that's just the way it is. And I can say that from a more anatomical point of view, but in practical application, that means, in downward facing dog, if you don't have a lot of ability to dorsiflex your foot, your downward facing dog, you're gonna have to bend into your knees more, because your legs, like, we always think like, I can't straighten my legs in downward facing dog. Not that that's the goal anyway, but I can't do it because I'm not flexible enough, right? And it's like, well, maybe, but if your bones are hitting your bones in your ankles, there ain't nothing you can stretch all the live long day. It's not gonna make you put your heels on the floor. So we've got our bone compression, which affects our range of motion. We've got our ligaments and our tendons, right? So one of those connects bone to bone, and one of those connects muscle to bone. Does anybody remember which one is which?
Ligaments connect. Wait, ligaments and tendons, right? Yeah, so tendons are what connects muscle to bone.
You got it. Yeah. And remember, and then ligaments connect bone to bone. So you remember the Achilles tendon, right? Everybody kind of knows where that is, and you can feel, okay, it connects to bone down here, and and you're never going to call that the Achilles ligament. So awesome. And then so ligaments connect bone to bone. They both have a lot less elasticity in them than muscles do. And so when your body is nearing its end range of motion, maybe this is actually what my elbows need more of. Maybe my elbows need more, less elasticity in the ligaments and tendons here, and I wouldn't hyperextend so much. But when you're nearing your end range of motion, your ligaments are kind of like, okay, we're getting closer. And so they tighten up more to protect the body's natural range of motion as well. So we've got our bone compression, we've got our ligaments becoming more taut, and then we've got our muscles. This is the most obvious one, and like I said, the one that most people think of when they think of yoga is that I don't have enough flexibility in my actual muscle. That is something that you can gain in yoga, absolutely. And then, but it's always kind of on a spectrum too, right? Where like, if you're 45 minutes into a class, I could probably bust out into the splits. Well, maybe. But that doesn't mean that I can bust out into the splits right now, cold, right? And that's sometimes something that gets people into trouble. I had a coworker years ago who did hot yoga, and in hot yoga, it's even more drastic because the heat of the room increases the elasticity of your muscles. And so I don't remember what pose it was, but he was just basically like, wow, in the middle of a hot yoga class, I can do this with my body. That must mean that I can do that with my body anytime. And so one day he was at the gym, muscles are cold, hadn't warmed up or anything, was not in a 104-degree room 30 minutes into a class. And he goes into this same shape, and I don't remember what he injured, but it was not good. And it's just kind of like, oh yeah, sometimes we think like, oh, because I can do this. So like what happens if, you know, a lot of times, going back to sequencing, you know, you would probably put figure 4 pose like later into the class. This is a pretty, you know, deep hip opener. You can feel a lot of sensation here. And it might, depending on how you like it, it might feel really yummy 45 minutes into the class. So what happens if you're 10 or 15 minutes into the class, probably 15 or 20, and the teacher's like, all right, let's come into a figure 4 pose. This is gonna look and feel wildly differently than it would if you were to put it 20 minutes down the line. And there are times when that's okay to do, where you can put like a more challenging, it's not even a good word, a pose like that, I'll just say, earlier in the class. But you need to basically draw awareness to your students and warn them and be like, hey, this isn't gonna look or feel like it's going to if we were doing this 20 minutes from now, right? And so note also to you, if you're in a class and a teacher does that, you know, puts a hefty pose up front, but they don't give you a warning, to yourself being like, oh, this is pretty early. Doesn't mean that it's bad, but I'm going to approach it differently. Maybe I'm not going to go into it as far. I'm really going to listen to my body and be cautious about it. 2 other things that might limit our range of motion: soft tissue compression. So breast tissue, big bellies, right? Like it might be, oh, I'm not feeling a lot of sensation in my forward fold because I've got a lot of stuff going on in the upper half of my body that's preventing me from going any further. And those are times where you can pull out lots of awesome modifications. It's like, well, how can we make room around the body? In this case, it'd be like, okay, let's try taking the legs a little bit further apart so that you actually can feel sensation, but your body isn't hitting your body before you start to feel that sensation. And then the last thing is pain and stiffness and soreness due to illness. Something like arthritis or osteoarthritis, where it's going like they have a medical condition going on, and that's just something that they need to pay extra attention to, right? And really be talking with their doctors about what type of sensation is safe, what type of sensation are warning signs for me that might be different warning signs than the rest of the population. There are some, what is it? I think it's rheumatoid arthritis, where I know some type of arthritis. Basically, like in the moment, you don't have the warning signs. And so like yin is a big one where it's like, you don't want to, it's not great for this population because they are going to put a lot of pressure into their joints, and they're not going to realize it because they're not going to get the same warning signs that we do. But then the next day, they're really going to be paying for it. So fostering those conversations around awareness with your students that then can also empower them to go and have, in this situation, to go and have conversations with medical professionals. So it's like, okay, what are things outside of the norm for me that I need to be aware of, and what are my own red flags in my body? Okay. Any questions?
So I have a question about certain poses, Supta, Pada. I don't know the English name for it, I'm sorry.
You
I'll
have a
show it to
picture?
you.
Okay, yeah.
So the teacher encouraged me to have a bend in the
Okay.
knee because we want the shoulder to be on the ground. Otherwise, we're straining the shoulder by doing this.
Okay.
But I think I will never be able to have it fully extended because my foot won't be able to do this, while it's straight. It just refuses to.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean that, like, because my body can't get into that shape eventually, that doesn't mean that, like, it's not suitable to do. I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say, like,
Yeah.
like, because I feel like my body should be able to eventually get that shape, but, it's.
Okay, so you're right on that it's okay for you to do it, even though you may not ever get into the term that I really, really hate, and I'm only going to say it once, is the deepest expression of the pose.
Yeah.
It is what you see typically on the cover of Yoga Journal, although they've been a little bit better, or on Instagram pages, things like that, where somebody is in a really extreme shape. Sometimes it's totally safe for their body, and also sometimes it's not. And it really, I don't like it so much. I don't like it because it is setting up this carrot at the end of the stick where people even have to be asking this question. I'm glad that you asked this question. I'm sad that we live in a society where you had to ask this question, because do you feel sensation?
Totally.
There you go. That is the goal of the pose. You are in your deepest expression of the pose. And also, I'm like, if you ever want to play around with the strap, make your arms longer, see how that might influence the experience for you, was one of the first things that came into my mind. But, we see people in these really extreme versions of poses. It doesn't mean that they're getting anything more out of it, or that they're even feeling more sensation than we are. So if the teacher cues the splits, I'm on the splits today, apparently I need it. Until this down a smidge. And let's say I'm over here and I'm like, I'm just gonna sit in half splits today, and I've got blocks underneath my hands, and I'm like, whew, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling like 7, 8 level of sensation. And then the person next to me is like, hips on the floor, folded over their leg. They might be feeling 7, 8 sensation. They might be feeling 4. They might be hypermobile and barely feeling anything at all. And that's just the danger of a lack of discussion around sensation and letting it be accidentally driven of what the end goal looks like. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. Thank you. Yeah. Did I answer your question? Okay. Let us.
I physically can go into like sleeping pigeon. I have my foot up to my ankle, definitely. But I found out closer, I feel more sensation right here is where I need it more. So since I found that, I was like, that feels so much better than having the reference pose is the language I can use.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Because like, let's say I go to Yoga Journal or I go to our yoga thing, look at, I like see that pose. I'm like, okay, that's my reference, and I can play with that pose, see what I need for my practice, which is kind of like why I say reference, because when I draw, I'm like, I can't draw that right now. I'll just do this like. Anyways, and I found that my mobility, like in
and my strength has gotten a lot stronger since focusing on like right here rather than doing all this hip stuff that I already am capable in.
Awesome, thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
And on the like mobility side, like I feel like there's this like idea that it's a good pose and that it's like really like so impressive if some, and I mean it is, but I think it forgets that there's like a danger to that, and that a lot of times people who are hypermobile can't gain strength in the, or like it's, they struggle with strength aspects of it as well. So I think it's like maybe just like this media version of anything is, it's good to like, it is good to talk about. Like yoga is flexibility, but it's also strength. It's also
There's also so many other things, right? Yeah.
I have a question. So with what you're saying, do you not say like sink deeper into a pose? Because I'm trying to think of how you avoid saying that when you're trying to invite people to, like I'm thinking lizard of like, you know, sometimes when you start out, you'll be on your hands, and as you exhale, you'll find like, oh, I'm like muscles loosen up, you're getting warmer, and then maybe you can come on to your elbows or something else like that. So how you kind of invite people to, I don't know, settle into their posture more as they're exhaling or doing things like that without saying sink deeper, or like,
Yeah.
how you go around that.
My language is always option 2. Option to stay right here, option to drop down to your forearms if that feels good. And if I need to, I might also say, neither is better or worse than the other. They're just different options. Yeah. So.
Sorry, were you gonna?
I
Go
was, but
ahead.
I also don't know. I don't need to. I think I've also said it before, and I'm just on my soapbox about this stuff. So go ahead.
Okay. I was just, as everyone was talking, it's just like quick for me in maybe like a personal way too. That like the deepest expression of pose is the one you feel the most sensation. Like deepest expression of pose for you is the one that you feel the most.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what got me. Cause I'm like, if Jacob's feeling a lot of sensation in that shape, which looking at you, I'm like, I can tell you are. Like that's it. That's the ding ding ding. We have a winner. Yeah, and it's right. It's this balance. Sthira Sukha Masana. The seat. I mean, this is not a really accurate translation, but it's basically like. The seat of the pose is one where you can find a balance of effort and ease. So you might be in a shape and you're like, oh, this is the max amount of sensation. Awesome. But you're also like, the face is scrunched up and you're, you know, it's like, okay, is that helpful? Sometimes you're like, I just gotta stretch this hamstring and I don't care how out of breath I am doing it. But most of the time, right, we're using asana as tools to learn how to hold space for both the effort and the ease simultaneously. Sometimes I'll cue in pigeon some things to make it a little bit more active for people, because I know that that's one that they can really like flop into and totally lean into just the ease. And it's like, that's great. And I love that you get to have that experience. And also, if you practice on the mat, finding a balance of effort and ease at the same time, is that going to make it easier for you to go out into the world and be like, oh, you know, I've got a really jam-packed day. I've got to go do this, and also be like, look at this beautiful blue sky, you know, just find a little bit of ease in it. So thanks for saying that. Yeah, driving it back home.
I felt like a little bit dumb after I said no one made me feel that way, but I was like, that's because it's true and obvious. And I was like, oh yeah.
No, but
it's like good to say.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Look at it, because I have hurt myself trying to go into the full expression of the pose, and just because I know that I can do it, but on some days my body doesn't necessarily need to do that. I need to stretch my hips more. I don't need to do this instead of this. So
Well, there's so many variations to different yoga poses that the fullest expression might be sleeping pigeon. The fullest expression might be popping your back leg up and grabbing your ankle so you're fully upright. For lizard, it might be dropping down on your forearms. For other people, they might be trying to like hook and go under, because that's an entirely other pose as well that you're pretty well queued up for. So it's like there's the fullest expression of what? Like, what are you going for? What are you looking for?
And you get to negotiate what it is that you want that practice. So there's one teacher, I forget who, I wouldn't say it even if I remembered, but there's one teacher here who always says like, oh, if you want to go into hurdler, you can. And they say this almost every time in lizard lunge. And I always laugh because I'm like, yeah, I probably right now, Cole, haven't done yoga in basically weeks at this point. I can, yeah, there we go. I can pop into hurdler. I can pop into hurdler. So if you're saying, if you can pop into hurdler, go for it. If I lived by that, I would never do a normal runner's lunge ever again. And that would mean that I was only getting the benefits of hurdler and never the benefits of, I mean, those are two wildly different experiences. But I would never get this again. And you're telling me just because I can that I should? Versus this idea of option two. It's neutral language. It's not, if you want more strength today, if you are feeling up for it, if you don't have any pain, if you want to take it further, it's just like option two. You don't, I'm on my soapbox, sorry. You don't have, take yourself and your ideas of why somebody else may want to choose a certain option, take that out of the picture and leave it up to them, because what could that open up to them, this world of possibility that maybe they don't feel strong that day and they try it anyway and they surprise themselves and they walk out of there with a huge smile on their face because they just had the biggest confidence boost. But if you had said, if you're feeling strong today, they wouldn't have tried it.
Exclusive language.
Exclusive, yeah. Okay, we gotta get back on that. Anatomy.
No, it's helpful.
Yeah, I love this stuff. I'm so glad to be here with you all. Okay, so range of motion. This is gonna be a question on your final exam. Range of motion can be impacted. You don't have to like list off these 5 things on your exam. But there is, it's all like all open book, and it's questions like, what's the deepest pose of a yoga pose mean? You know, like, it's all like, we want your opinion, we want you to help synthesize things. It's not like, what's the Sanskrit for finding effort and ease in a pose at the same time?
I would cry.
No, yeah, you're good. If you just like showed up and been like conscious for teacher training, you will be fine. Okay. Shall we take 6 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, I feel like we just need a little like stand up, move around, go to the bathroom, be ready to come back and spend the last like hour and 45 just kind of keep focusing on things. Yeah, y'all are doing great.
Worthy thing.
And
I love this discussion.
Yeah. See, this is actually bringing me to like a place in my mind where I'm like, oh yeah, the fullest expression of the poses. It really is a shitty thing to say because you're like, I mean,
Love it, we need another shirt that says
expressing,
that.
yeah, like expressing yoga is so individual. You know, it's not like the fullest expression. Yeah, like it's really individual. So,
Well, it's funny when people tell you like, oh, by the way, the fullest like I remember in hot yoga for standing bow, a lot of times teachers would say like the fullest thing is when you can get your foot into a split position. Is the like you're working towards this particular thing, and that's like, I mean, I don't think they were expecting anyone to get there or like saying you needed to get there. But yeah, just like having like, oh, there's this goal, and like if I yoga hard enough one day, I will like achieve it, and I don't know.
So I love Lewis's concept of reference poses, just because it takes
Yeah,
out the
that's really
exaltation of what the pose is
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a reference, yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Shameless plug, I'm doing a CEU on, it's like late in September on a Saturday or Sunday. And it's called Creative Cueing and Inclusive Language, and we will have conversations like these. So if that's something that interests you, unit.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a unit, damn.
When is it?
September.
Once you get your certification, you have to, like, what is it? You have to maintain your certification with continuing credits.
Well, if you choose to register with Yoga Alliance, they require you to do 30 CEUs every 3 years.
Oh,
A year.
So they're like workshops? sort of thing?
Yeah, if a workshop offers CEUs, because some do and some don't.
I saw that Laura's had one,
Mhm.
adjustments that
Mhm.
offered.
Is that the one she was talking about today?
No, she's talking about it, the one next Saturday is just nonsense and Santosha.
Oh,
Is that the primary way people get CEUs?
Workshops? Yeah. I mean, really the only other way to get them is to do like trainings or, like here, if you were to apply for and, get approved for an internship, like you have somebody a mentor who comes take your class and gives you feedback, like you could count your time with them as, CEUs. Like we try to offer free CEUs for our teachers as much as possible, but mostly it's either like trainings or little workshops.
So if you're like trying to do gentle yoga or something. that would count.
Yeah, yin yoga, hot yoga.
Okay, so you do a workshop for hot yoga, not necessarily a whole training.
Hot yoga is actually, we do a 40-hour training for
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Will we get in like say to the teacher after this, do we get an explanation of like what we can do afterwards, like how the certifications work, what you can do afterwards, or is that?
That'll be more like business of yoga.
Okay.
Sorry. I mean, after this, really, it's like you're cleared to teach vinyasa. We offer lots of other internships after your vinyasa internship, where you can be like, oh, I want to learn how to teach kids yoga. I want to learn how to teach gentle, like things that are more like lower hanging fruit. That it's like, okay, we don't think you need a whole. That's why we set the bar high. Sorry, let me just swallow this. I'm like, so self-conscious. That's why we set the bar high with vinyasa, because then it's super easy to go out and learn how to teach yin in a day, or do a gentle internship for a few weeks, or hot training is substantial because it is a substantially different other style, but still that's 40 hours compared
But
to
you've
200.
gotten the basis of like teaching
Mhm.
so that you can go from there.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to talk at you the whole break. Okay, what are my notes? One minute.
Okay, can you still work there?
Proprioception?
Proprioception. Proprioception.
Interoception.
Just
Yeah.
yoga. Proprioception, because I'm thinking of like, you forget you have, like, you'll stub your toe.
Yeah.
Forget like where your body's at. Every once in a while, I was like, turning a corner, like, hit my hip on something.
Yeah.
So I was like, obviously, the interested yoga, but the other one, I'm like, how does yoga really help you? It doesn't have that like spatial.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
awareness.
yeah, because of when we are,
If it's like really bad though, and you
like, let's say I'm in like an open twist,
like,
and the teacher tunes energy through your back hand,
Yeah, and I
like you're getting the interoception, but then you're also getting like, or that's maybe not the best idea, but for example, but cues, more directive cues actually are going to target more proprioception and reminding you like, hey, this is where your foot is, and if it's not there, then receiving that hands-on adjustment to be like, this is what I'm talking about, and you're like, oh, yeah. I also run into like walls and things all the time.
Yeah. I was
Me
like, this
too.
word just sounds
Mine's
like,
going
like
off.
the opposite of clumsiness. Like, if you're really clumsy, you just have to be like aware of where you are. That's 7 years forever.
Well, and that's an interesting concept too. When you in yoga, if you feel like, oh, I'm really tuned into my body, I know where it is in space, I understand the sensations, what I'm feeling, but in your daily life, I notice that I run into walls and doorknobs when I'm not grounded and paying attention at all. And it's almost the same thing that we talked about earlier, right? I feel like it's my body's way of being like, hello, can you pay attention to me a little bit, please? Because you're just like up in the ethers. I'm like, I need you to be here because you're hurting me.
Yeah.
And it's like that body getting your attention again. Natural consequence.
Daycare that your body will take a break and you may not like the way that it takes it, so you need to take care of yourself so that you don't crash.
Yeah.
My mom calls it hitting a wall.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a theory. I'm developing a theory as we're talking about it. You tell me if I'm totally off track. I feel like when you're doing yoga, the movements, like the actual asana, help develop the reception more because you're feeling stretching them
Yeah, you're
more
feeling
by
all those body
routine.
sensations.
And then I feel like the mental aspect of yoga, like taking your time and slowing down and being present and stuff like that, might develop like the proprioception.
Yes, you're right on the nail.
Right.
On the nose. Hitting the nose of the nail
The
on the
nose is
nail.
it's done.
All right, let's just practice saying these words. Prio, ception, proprioception. Again, proprioception. Interoception. Interoception. All right, friends laying down, y'all doing okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so now, hey, look, an hour and 22 minutes later, we get to come back to our balloon. I'm so glad I was like, maybe we don't need to cover this stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this a bit.
It does.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'm just realizing I have.
So we're going to talk about the spine a little bit for spine, hips, and surrender. We have different parts of our spine. We have you want to say it?
Cervical, thorax, and.
Cervical spine, thoracic spine, and lumbar spine. Basically, your cervical spine is your neck. These are very rough estimates on where I'm drawing these lines, okay? On the balloon. Your thoracic is your, is your mid back. And the lumbar is the low back. And then we also have the sacrum, which is 5 bones that are fused together and they form part of the pelvis. And then we also have the coccyx. Let's see, CYX, just like your tailbone. We're not really going to talk about those, but okay, so you've probably heard this term. That's the double S curve. So you'll see here, if I were to draw the letter S, right, we've kind of got that loose shape here. And by the way, this is like
That's what my spine looks like. No, I'm
Oh.
serious.
ouch. Yeah,
Yeah,
scoliosis or
yeah, on both sides.
Ah.
It's not straight anywhere, not even in the neck.
oof. So this is the person's facing this way. Just to make sure we're all clear. And you can feel this too, right? Like for most of us, right? And what a great thing to be aware of. For most of us, it's like you feel this little bit of like your neck caves in a little bit. You feel it's almost like a little bit of a cat back. It's called kyphosis that happens in the thoracic spine. And then the lumbar, you have that little bit of the dip back in. And we do want to, by and large, honor right, the natural S curve of the spine in yoga. So that's why we eliminate language like flat back or straight back. One of the reasons, part of it is also inclusion for people who spines don't look like this to begin with. Yeah. But it's like we never want a flat back anyway, because we want to, at our most like neutral, strong engagement, still honor this natural S curve.
So when you're like a halfway lift, say it's make a separate shape or
Oh, that's
because
halfway lift is so hard. And sometimes if I absolutely have to, I will tell them what I just told you all. I will be like, I'm only saying this word once. You want a flat back here. The reason why I'm never going to say that again is because what we actually want is to honor this natural S curve. But sometimes they just don't understand. And I'm, oh my gosh, I'm like having strongest adjustment I ever gave this morning, trying to help this guy like pull his shoulders back. Like he just was not, that was a time I probably could have said like, think about flattening out the back a little bit, but I
Shoulders, like if you press a hand against the back and you say squeeze your shoulders, and
Mhm.
it's still like
sometimes they
not
just do not, and it's
where they hinge at the right there.
yeah, and you might occasionally have to pull it out of your back pocket. Personally, I always follow it up with more explanation because I just obviously feel passionate about it. Because sometimes just like I've said every other thing that I think should make sense, and it's just nothing is changing.
So you usually say what, neutral back or?
I
tabletop
say,
back?
think about, it depends, like in halfway lift specifically, I think about tabletop actually would have been a good idea. Think about pulling the shoulders back. Think about broadening through the collarbones. Sometimes depending on the pose, it might be more about like length through the crown of the head. Pretend like a string is pulling your skull up toward the sky. And then when I see changes based off of adjustments or these cues, that's definitely when you want to follow it up with like, there you go. That's it. Because there's obviously, it's taken them some time to get there. So to be like, yes, please remember that for next time. And then they probably won't.
Can I ask something about, okay, there's two different types of spines that like, I mean, there's like the spine that most people have, and then there's the scoliosis, and then there's the other one where it's like their spine is overly flexed, right? Or whatever.
Oh, like that, is it like they have a hunchback?
No,
Is that what you're saying? No.
no, it's like overly.
Oh.
Like they're like it's dumped a little bit, and so
Yeah, like I don't remember what that's called.
Well, there's lots of things that it could be depending on, and I don't know most of it enough to speak to it. Because I used to work with high medical needs population and kiddos, and like, I mean, this one girl, like, it was like she was living in wheel pose, just like complete, like sort of, yes.
it's lordosis.
But that's what I was thinking, lordosis, like the sway, like more of a sway in the low back, more pronounced, is that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay, cool,
Because-
awesome.
It's
Yeah.
usually in your lower back,
Mhm.
not your, I mean, it can be, but it's usually lumbar.
Yeah.
I'm only asking because like it's good to know for adjustments,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I was adjusting Lily and, you know,
I'm
I'm
a
just
hard
like,
person to adjust.
no, I didn't know that you had scoliosis, but I was also just like, well, maybe her body's just like this, you know, like, it's fine.
Yeah, and that's right why we never want to force somebody into a shape with our adjustments. It's always like encouraging direction and having that conversation of like, how does this feel? Is this okay? One time Austin tried like, I don't remember what they were doing with their hands in like plank, down dog, tabletop, things like that, but like their palms were nowhere near on the floor. And Austin was going in trying to like help encourage them, be like, hey, put your whole hand on the floor. And so we started to, and Austin said, is that okay? And the guy was like, no, he had some sort of
Yeah, I've
injury or
I've seen
surgery or
people that
something.
have nerve, I forgot what it was, but they basically like, their fingers end up kind of curled
Mhm.
and.
Yeah, and so just like to be having these conversations And when possible, right, probably not during a flow, unfortunately, but when possible, you know, yeah, think of, talking to them. Yeah, think about engaging here. Okay, can you lengthen here? Does that feel okay? Yeah, adjusting with lordosis is gonna look and feel different, and keeping in mind though that it doesn't mean that they're not doing the work and they're not doing what you're saying. It's just gonna look very different on the outside. Speaking of lordosis, what happens in the cervical spine and the lumbar spine is called a lordotic curve. That's where we get this term lordosis from. And that means that it is this like reaching this way. See, I really didn't draw this very well, but you kind of get the idea with the neck. And then the thoracic has what we call a kyphotic curve. Kyphotic. It's a fun one. Kyphosis is what it's called when you see somebody who's like, usually they're older, who like have a very pronounced like curve in the upper spine. My mom too. Yeah, you'll see that a lot.
Does that tend to be environmental, or like if you're doing a lot of those types of postures, or is it partly also just like this is kind of your
If you
spine
do
and how it?
anything for long enough, your spine will stay that way.
Okay.
You got
Period. End of story.
Yeah. And part of it can be like genetic, medical, condition based. And a lot of it though, I would say is, I'm very curious what it's going to be like when my generation, when we're 80 years old, after
Yeah.
being on our phones,
Yeah.
our whole,
No,
yeah. So it's like,
right.
that's why we emphasize heart openers so much, because we need this movement.
Something I've noticed, and there wasn't a study about it, it was more just like a pattern that they've noticed is, with my generation, our spine curves more, and so our lower sacrum or lower back are tighter. So like when I'm laying on my back, my lower back is where it used to 3 years ago.
So
So now I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna just be working on that now.
yeah. And you are, I mean, and anybody
Yeah.
can impact their body. But the younger that you are, and you might be the youngest one in this room, but it's like, the more pliable your body's still gonna be at that point. Okay. You'll hear probably different numbers with these. So, right, we have I'm trying to think which one is plural and which one is singular. We have our vertebrae in our spine, right? Those little, I'm going to simplify it to these little like bony points that you feel along the spine, and in between them all are the discs. We have in the cervical spine, we have 7 vertebrae. By the way, the singular word of this is vertebra. So when you tell somebody in integration, roll up the spine 1 vertebra at a time. We have 7. We have 7 vertebra in the cervical spine. We have 12 in the thoracic, and we have 5 in the lumbar. And so you might hear somebody refer to, oh, I have a slip disc between T for thoracic, between T5 and T6. So these numbers, how they work is that each one of these sections, they start 1 at the top, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. So if somebody says, I have a slip disc between L3 and L4, that's how you kind of figure out where that is. These vertebrae become progressively larger the farther down you go. Why? Because they're more weight bearing. So that's why in bridge pose, we're really careful of putting a lot of pressure on the neck, because those vertebrae are smaller, because all that they have to worry about at this point is holding up the head. Ones down here, they gotta hold everything up. So they're stronger, they're more robust, they're bigger. The ones up here don't have as much to manage, but that also means that when we're doing inversions, to also be treating them very like we can't be treating our body how we do when we're upright, because the robustness and strength of our vertebrae is now flipped, and we're putting a lot of pressure on these smaller vertebrae. Your neck has the most range of motion of the spine, where it can turn in any direction, right? I'm not going to do this, but I could kind of take my head and just go whee in like a big circle, right? Like it can do lateral, it can do flexion and extension, rotation, pretty far, right? Which makes sense anthropologically when you're like, yeah, I gotta like, hey, where's that tiger at? That I'm running from.
Ain't making it out alive, though.
What's that?
I said ain't making it out alive.
You're making it all alive. Well, we're gonna talk more about this tiger later.
Is that due to always looking around, always keeping at least doing things, or is it just biologically built different? I mean, if you constantly bending around with your rest of your spine, be just as bendy.
Oh, well, maybe over millions and millions of years of use in that way, but it's definitely.
To answer your question, no.
It's
Yeah.
what it is.
I've been doing yoga forever and my spine is still very, very messed up.
Years.
She said it would take millions.
And it was kind of like a safety question. I know that when like people on forward fold or like stack was being forward, they like let their head hang.
Mhm.
And there's this again anatomy where sometimes the sensation gets mixed up between the muscles and the ligaments and the tendons and just those. But then there's also like accidentally stretching the central nervous system, the nerves in the neck, and that's some people get injured when they do that. So I got very pregnant. I'm like, I'm not gonna fall. I'm gonna lean my head a little bit, but I'm gonna keep those muscles engaged, because in the neck, it becomes so much easier to accidentally hurt the joints and hurt the skin there. And I'm not sure if that's like applicable for some people. For me, it is. But I wanted to mention that sometimes like forward fold like that, you don't want to do that because you can stretch right there. That can put tension. That's what I was looking for, and compression.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've never even heard of that happening. So
Yeah.
thanks for the PSA.
I feel it. I'm
Yeah.
like, whoop, I'm not doing that. Looking up.
Yeah. And right, it's hard because it's like we don't want to discourage people from using the full capacity of their body, right? And it's hard to walk this fine line of like, be cautious, be smart, be paying attention, versus, oh, don't ever do that, even though it might actually be completely okay. Which is why, like in camel, right? So like knowing that our cervical spine has the most amount of range of motion of the whole spine, that's why it's like, you know, in camel pose, yeah, it is okay to completely surrender the head back if it feels okay for the practitioner. So, yeah, thank you. All right, so moving on to the thoracic. So like I said, there are 12 vertebrae. They are connected at some point, right, with the rib cage to basically their function. Well, not basically, but one of their functions is to protect our precious organs right here. And so we have a lot of rotation that's available in the thoracic spine. So a lot of our twists that we're doing in class really come from the thoracic area, right? These deep compressed twists. Most of that's happening in the thoracic. And then, like I said, we have a lot of range of flexion in here. And I just did this and I wish I hadn't. We have a lot of ability for spinal flexion. What we actually lack some of here is the extension. And that has in part to do, there's a couple different factors, but the one I'll speak to is the connection with the rib cage too. And also at that point, basically you have these little, I forget what they're called, but I know it, pointy things that come out of your vertebrae and like, they're gonna hit. It's that bone compression that we talk about. Like when you, sometimes it's like, all right, this is as much hard opening as I'm gonna get in this pose. It's like, that's just where my body stops. It's where the spine stops. It's that bone compression.
Your spinal process.
Yes, thank you. Your spinal processes, where they're gonna like just hit the next layer of bone underneath it. And it's like, all right, well, that's where I am, because mine are longer apparently. Yeah.
Sorry, so is
No.
the supine twist, is that hitting more lumbar? Because it seems like people have a very different experience with supine twist than like a revolved crescent.
It's gonna be a lot of thoracic and a little bit of lumbar. The lumbar, let me put a pin, this is a great segue. But kind of yes and, but I will circle back in about 30 seconds. Range of motion here, last little bit on this is that we're actually limited with our lateral flexion here, and you can feel quite a bit of it, but there is definitely it's not going to be as drastic as it is in the neck, right? This is in the thoracic spine is where we're really focusing a lot of our heart openers. And for heart openers and combating this text neck that a lot of us have at this point, and this forward head movement, right? We don't need extreme heart openers as much as we need repetition of gentle, sustainable heart opening. That's why like baby cobra, upward facing dog, halfway lifts, these are so great. And yes, it's absolutely, I think, a brilliant idea to always keep wheel or camel or something else more geared toward this in your sequence. But it doesn't have to be, right? We're only doing 1, maybe 2 camel poses a class. We're not doing 15 like we are with upward facing dog, right? Okay, now moving on to the lumbar spine. So we have the 5 vertebrae down here, and in terms of our range of motion, it's most limited in the rotation. So this is interesting when you are in a deep compressed twist, right? You're in your prayer twist, and the teacher's like, oh, but keep your hips square. Which the goal, the reason why they're saying that is to try to isolate a lot of the twist in the thoracic spine, because it's designed to twist way more than the very, very little our lumbar spine is able to twist. However, we have a couple of options, and I'm not saying that this is always, it's not right to ever try to square your hips in a twist. I'm just saying it's going to bring you out of it, and that's okay, right? We always want to prioritize our health alignment rather than getting into the deepest expression of the pose, said in air quotes for those of you watching. So if I were in my prayer twist, my hips are square-ish, but the left one definitely ducked down a little bit. If I were to straighten them, right, I'm coming out of my twist a little bit. So it's this idea that, and we also want to keep the hips square-ish in these twists to make sure that we are keeping the sacrum snug and secure, like muscularly we are engaging there. But there needs, we're not robots. We are not 90-degree angles all day long. We need to be able to have a little bit of give. Otherwise, if we don't back out of the prayer twist and we really force our hips square, you are going to risk tweaking the lumbar spine by putting more not leverage, just like sheer force on the joints trying to twist when that's just not what they're designed for. So in lumbar, in a supine twist, it's very different, right? Because you don't have 2 feet on the ground here. You've got one hip that's totally come off the ground to go with you. And so the flow of the hips in that movement is going to make it appear that there's a lot more rotation happening in the lumbar spine. than there actually is. It's just allowing the hips to really travel with you. A lot of, well, you can have bulging discs, and I bring this up because a lot of us are walking around with bulging and or herniated discs and are completely unaware of it. Some people might say, oh, I have degenerative disc disease. I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying to some degree, all of our discs are degenerating as we get older. And something that feels good for herniated discs are forward folds, because you're taking the spine and as you invert it, you're taking all this pressure off of, let's say it's right here, and you're letting it expand down, and it's like, oh, that feels so good. But then what happens as you come back upright again is that disc has the potential to herniate and slip out even further, so that then when you come back up, the pain is worse in that area.
So a slip disc and a herniated disc are the same thing?
That's a whole can of worms.
Okay, no, sorry.
Some,
I'm just
yeah,
trying to
no,
understand
no.
better for my body.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard some medical professionals talk about herniated, slipped, and bulging discs as absolutely the same thing. I've heard some doctors very intentionally delineate
Okay, 'cause that was
basically,
kind of my understanding.
yeah.
Basically the same thing.
They can, I think they can, it depends on who you ask, and they can indicate different levels of severity depending on who you ask. Yeah. So you might get somebody in your class, all this to say, who's like, oh yeah, I've got this herniated, slipped, whatever disc. And a lot of times when we're dealing with injury in class, it's like, well, what feels good to you? What aggravates it? So they may be like, oh, well, forward folds feel great. And it's like, yeah, I bet they do. Let's talk about that and let's revisit that idea, and please be talking to your doctor, because they are probably going to be more likely to listen to their doctor who's saying, yeah, you're going to go to yoga, but like you need to really take it easy on the forward folds. And that's where we can offer up, maybe it's like a halfway lift, right? Maybe you have a stack of blocks underneath it, maybe more than one block, right? Like a lot of blocks, so that you can still feel that flow and all of the other benefits that the asana serves beyond the physical body of those forward folds, without putting as much pressure on this process happening. Thank you, because I realized I was like, I glossed over it, and hopefully somebody will ask if they don't know. So we have, all right, all of our vertebrae going up the spine, and in between them are these little spongy, they look just like that. They're these little spongy things. It's almost, okay, imagine a Ziploc bag full of water, but it's not like full to the brim. It's just like, it's full, but then you've squeezed out the rest of the air and you've zipped it back up. And you place one book on the floor, and then you have your Ziploc bag, and then you place another book on it, and then you keep alternating. So those Ziploc bags in between, they are the discs. They are what allow for a lot of movement in the spine. When we have bones fused together, either by nature or via surgery, it's that part of the spine doesn't move anymore. It has to have something in between all of the joints, the vertebrae, to be able to flex and extend and abduct. That was an abduction, lateral flexion. So what can happen via genetics and or lifestyle and or injury is that these discs, so imagine your Ziploc bag, and again, I'll go the route that I'm more familiar with. Some medical professionals I have heard say they are all the same thing: bulging, herniated, ruptured, slipped. that,
This looks painful.
Well, yeah,
Slip
I'm
discs,
looking
like
at
them
it too.
impacted on top
This-
of each other though, right?
no, yeah, it's, I don't like this conversation, freaks me out. Basically, it literally, okay, so this is the front of their body. So the disc starts to protrude out from its original home. And that means that the disc and all of the nerves that it's had, this is a horrible, don't take this drawing literally.
Okay. Because I didn't know what it was, and this does not look fun.
No, it's,
And it's on the actually, so.
it's, yeah, it's, so that disc and all of the nerves that it's housing now are pressed out of place. The ruptured disc at that point means that the Ziploc bag is broken open and that fluid is just,
Would that disc basically be gone at that point?
when it's ruptured.
Yeah.
It's like the Ziploc bag is just still there, but it's broken open and all the
That's
fluid
a
is.
really good analogy, because you do have cervical fluid, and then over time, the like fluid in your like cervical and thoracic and lumbar spine starts to deteriorate, no matter how old you are, like you were saying. But yeah, I like the sponge analogy because it is kind of like you can have it on one side, but not the other of your particular vertebrae, if that makes sense. Like I have, just to give you an example, I have 2 slip discs in my lumbar, and I have a pinched disc, it's in my thoracic.
Mhm.
So, but I don't have any disc deterioration in my cervical at all, which is good. Because it connects to the brain. But, yeah, I've never heard it explained as a sponge. I like that.
Oh, good.
And now it's, C7 or the bone right after C7.
Which, so the bone right after C7,
Yeah,
right, would
like
be
T1.
T1.
T1. It's like, and it's both my sister and I have it where it's like super. Is that like the one that's like on the
dinosaur one?
top? Yeah, and here's this.
The dinosaur one.
That's good to remember it. And that's how,
Big grass
Which
roots.
dinosaur is
Like,
Yeah,
there's a part of your lower spine that is, also starts with a C, and I can't remember right now. And if you have swelling of the spine, they sometimes remove it to keep that from happening.
yourself, it feels more
Um,
because when I felt
I've had this surgery and I really
Oh, wow.
don't know what it's
There's
called.
I have no idea.
Um,
One more note on the spinal disc health, for these people who come in and they're like, oh, but the forward folds feel so good. So, right, we need to avoid the extreme forward folds. Talk to their doctor, and gentle twists can actually be really healing for some of these conditions, because it's almost like swaddling rocking a baby, and you're just like, okay, you can get back into place, maybe. I mean, maybe not, but it offers that potential.
Are there any engagement cues that can be given to people who have something with their discs? Like, I wouldn't imagine like necessarily engaging your core would help with your spine. but is
Absolutely
there
it would.
anything-
That's what I would
it?
say.
Okay.
Mhm.
That's why I
Yeah.
engage my core so much, is
Yeah.
because it lets up all of my spine. That's also why I say that a lot.
Yeah, so right when okay, so if you feel comfortable, just like sit how you're probably already sitting, where you're just kind of like, maybe not after this conversation, but how you usually do, right? And then find axial extension. Okay, now you're like really having to work, but like keep your core strong, and then see, like you can like soften a little bit. We're not like axial extension. You're like, okay. So now you've created, right, when we're creating axial extension, we are increasing the distance slightly in between the vertebrae, multiple vertebrae, and then we're using the core to hold it in place, right? And that's why we do core that not only focuses on the front side of the core, but also the sides and the back of the core as well, because it does wrap around and it can be used to protect this part of the body. Kind of how we talked about a few weeks ago, right? When it's like, oh, I dropped a pencil, let me, right? And there's the two very drastically different ways that you can like slump over to pick it up versus like, okay, I'm gonna hinge from my hips, I'm gonna keep my core engaged, like that protection of the low back. So yeah, so core absolutely was my answer.
When I have my back, like I'm engaging my core, I'm engaging my back, I find intense in between my shoulder fatigue. Like if I hold my back straight for like 5 minutes and past that, and in between my shoulders, I feel like this, I call it an itching pain, where it's not pain.
I
it's
know,
like,
I feel it too.
oh, and I'm trying to strengthen the muscles, like doing that a little bit more. But I was wondering if as a student, you had any advice so I can keep my back straight.
I'm gonna go back to what we said for the heart openers of the thoracic spine, where concern yourself less with extreme and let it be the repetitive, the continuous, because I absolutely feel it too. Yeah.
It's
It really, I know. Yeah. Yep.
That's why I sit against the wall a lot.
Even when I sit against the wall,
Really
I
start to
like that
feel
into
it.
my lower back. I'm trying to keep my shoulders flush with the wall.
That's like this bone thing, just like
I'll do
over
that too.
time.
I've like done.
Yeah, but even before phones and technology were around, like look at the people who are our elders now. Like we need as very young children, like to be taught how to really sit correctly, and that's just something that doesn't
And just
happen.
stand up right. Like most kids don't even know that they have bad posture until
Oh,
they're about to graduate from high school. And it's like
Yeah.
you've literally been standing wrong your entire life. That's
Yeah.
why you look the way you do.
I used to play the piano, so my lower back muscles are super engaged all the time. But then since I stopped playing piano, I've noticed that even though I can engage this, that falls forward a little bit. And that's why I'm like noticing my shoulders. Anyways, it's just so interesting. Play more instruments, kids.
Yeah.
Or sing.
But like also like these like ergonomic, so it's like, and I feel it a lot when I'm playing the harmonium, right? That Bryce had out a few weeks ago when you were chanting. So it's like, because it's down here and there's just not a lot you can, like, you just have to be down here playing it. And so it's like, okay, like pulling it up into my lap, setting it on blocks. And it's basically this like ergonomic functionality. Like, okay, how can we, right? Like laptops, that's why laptops are so bad, because the keyboard and the screen are connected when really it needs to be keyboard down here so that we can find good posture in the thoracic and lumbar spine. But then the screen's attached to it. So my cervical spine now is getting a brunt. And it's like for every, I think, centimeter that your head is forward, it's an extra something like 12, 15 pounds of weight. Yeah. that
Especially
you're-
if you have heavy hair.
yeah. So that adds up when we're down here. That's so much more weight that we're putting that pressure on the spine. So if you're able to look at, okay, how can I set up a bunch, like pretend like it's yin and be like, how can I get all the props so that when I'm reading or that when I am watching a movie or when I'm at my desk working, that you're not working against your body, because and that might have been Bernie Clark who wrote a book about yin. So yin, you hold poses for several minutes at a time. And it's less about stretching the belly of the muscle, but more about impacting the connective tissues of the body that holds the fascia, the ligaments and ligaments and tendons that hold everything in place. And if it was Bernie or whoever said, everything that we do, like how we live our lives, is yin yoga. Because if we live our lives like this, like one of you said it earlier, it's like, if you do this all day long, like that is going, it's, you're inviting it in. So
that's why I've heard that even though, it's like the good posture is what people need, but also it's just more movement and just movement in general, because like even if we did sit upright all the time, there is potential downfall in that as well, just because you need you need to move, you
Exactly.
need to continue to like, and the blood flow and all of those other things are like one of the biggest impacts. not just why we do yoga.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were, for people who are sitting at their desk all day, even if they've got great posture, then, you're sitting in a desk, you're shortening the psoas, which we're just about to talk about, and the hip flexors, so then you're like, all right, I'm gonna stand all day. And then,
Right,
then
that's
it's like,
what-
there's
and then there's,
always
like, and then all of a
a
sudden
give
you're
and take,
shortening.
yeah, so it's this, variety, just how, so they say that like, you need to be eating 30 different vegetables and fruits, like 30 different varieties of whole foods each week. And it's not just like, oh, I'm getting a ton of kale and a ton of spinach. It's like, no, you need a variety.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with movement.
Same thing with entertainment these days.
With entertainment.
I've been watching a lot of superhero analysis videos.
Mm.
Why is it always Marvel? Why can't I have like a lighthouse one of these days?
All right, let's stand back up just to get some movement in. We're gonna talk about the hips. So raise your hand if you've heard of the psoas. Okay. So the psoas is I want to say it's the largest muscle of the body. It connects the upper body to the lower body. So let's find some, just for funsies, I'll word it like this. Hip flexion and knee flexion of the right leg.
Oh, the right.
Yeah. At one-legged mountain, awesome. And then just march it out in place. Do that a few times back and forth, side to side. March it in place. Now really slow it down. Do this in slow motion. Yeah, so what you're feeling is a combination of the psoas and other hip flexors contracting to lift the leg up. And then you're like, okay, so now lift the leg again. And now I'm gonna count backwards from 5. Don't set your foot down, like slowly set it down as I'm counting, okay? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, you felt that, yeah. Even as we are releasing, the muscles are having to resist gravity. And so there's still the muscles, what they do, they pull. So the muscles are still pulling, even as you're letting it down. The psoas is still pulling to hold your leg in place so that you don't just drop it to the floor. Let's take your feet out wide, stagger a little bit. Let's find, this is just for fun now. Let's find some like figure 8 motions with the hips. Let the arms make some big circles side to side. Yeah, really let the shoulders be loose. Maybe the arms smack your low back. Like no muscle engagement there. Yeah. Okay. And now come back to stillness and face forward again. Ground down through your right foot. And we're gonna find an airplane. So left toes kickstand back behind you. And so right, finding that extension of the left hip. So you're stretching through the psoas. I'll show you where it is in a minute. That front of the back leg, and then start to come back to center. And before we go into this side, so there's a couple different ways to really go into this pose, right? Where you're like, I'm gonna just kind of tilt forward and fall into it. But let's start with the toes kickstanded behind you. And think about keeping the torso and the standing leg like in one line-ish, like upright. And now lift the back leg to find the hip extension instead of leaning forward. Is that more sensation maybe?
How is
I'm
this
feeling
different?
things. Actually, I have better balance.
Yeah, warrior 3 would be, and you can come out of this. Warrior 3, I'm not gonna do it because it is a heavy pose. So you've got your, actually you're gonna talk about this with Kristen, so I'm gonna let her, so I don't step on her toes, and also arms and other things. Okay, so you can stay standing, you can move some more, but I'm done telling you what to do. Okay, so the psoas reaches from the inner thigh and it spirals up here. So it is holding, single-handedly holding the lower half of your body to the upper half of your body. Way to go, psoas. That's a lot of work. It is our largest hip flexor. So anytime that we're finding this movement, which sure, maybe because we're marching it out in place, how often do you do this though? Okay, but how often do you walk?
Doing that.
How often?
Marching every day.
So right, we are finding a lot of active engagement in the psoas if you are walking, hiking, biking, pretty much living in Colorado and taking advantage of the outdoors. If you are sitting in a desk all day and it's tightening and it's shrinking so that then it's like, you ever feel that when you stand up and you're like, I can't even like stand up all, like I have to like stand up slowly because it's just like cramping and I feel so old.
When you drive a lot.
When you're driving a lot,
Oh,
yes, yeah.
Sitting is so bad and driving away.
Yeah. Now the psoas, apart from all of these physical things that it does for us, you can come down whenever you're ready, but please stay standing as long as you want. The psoas is the primary muscle involved in the sympathetic nervous system. So we're gonna talk about the nervous system for a bit. So we have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah, please. When we are in when our sympathetic nervous system, and I'm going to shorten this with SNS, our sympathetic nervous system, when this is upregulated, that means that we are in fight or flight. So historically, this has been helpful because the tiger is chasing us.
We love it.
We just, a little happy tiger, just looking for a snack. It's chasing us. And so our body says nothing else matters right now because nothing is more dangerous than this tiger. So I don't need to think about or deal with anything other than being able to run really fast or to fight it off. I'm skipping around in my notes. Okay, so that means that we are sending a lot of blood, like our heart is pumping really fast so that we can be able to exert a lot of energy out of nowhere. Our sympathetic nervous system releases adrenaline and other stress hormones to help keep us alert. So it's like, oh no, there's another tiger back there too. I almost missed it, right? It's not like, oh, I just came out of a meditation. Were the lights flickering? I didn't even notice. You know, it's like, no, you notice every little thing that's going on. There's a clip there, hypersensitive, yeah. It decreases digestion because you don't need to deal with digestion right now. It's bottom of the barrel on the list of priorities of what needs to be dealt with. Alternatively, we have our parasympathetic nervous system. This is when you're like, oh, I just took the best yoga class, you guys. You know, when you're like really relaxed. Our parasympathetic, you might also hear as rest and digest. Because now that your body is not actively fighting off two saber-toothed tigers, you're like, oh, I can actually worry about other things like digesting this food. I can reallocate, right? We only have a certain number or a certain amount of energy and resources in our body. This is a matter of where are those resources getting directed to. So when we are in rest and digest, our body is relaxed, resting, hopefully feeding, right? Like today, remember how I was like super worked up and anxious earlier? And I said, I was like, I went home to eat lunch. Guess who did not eat lunch today? Because I was too anxious. My sympathetic nervous system was upregulated. I wasn't going to eat. I'm so hungry and I've got another thing after this. And I wasn't able to eat because this is where you eat. And so this is the danger. This is the sad thing that's happened in our society. Well, I shouldn't say our society, just being human, is that most of us are not being, I was not being chased by a tiger. I had a text from a friend. And my sympathetic nervous system started upregulating itself because because I have issues. But we see this a lot, right? With like, oh, I'm stuck in traffic, or I got a scary email from my boss. I don't know if I'm getting fired tomorrow or not. Do I have enough money? Am I going to have enough money to keep a roof over my head and to keep food on my table? And so it makes sense how you can track this, that scary email from your boss that you don't know if you're, hey, can we chat tomorrow morning? And it might be like, hey, I've got a new cool idea I'm excited about, or it might be you're fired. And it makes sense that with our not knowing, and our brain needs answers. I forget why, I forget like the thing that it's called, but like we actively look to finish an incomplete picture. So if we don't have all of the information, our brain goes to, oh, it's not that my boss has some cool thing to share with me, a new project they want me to do. It's, oh, I'm getting fired, and in 2 weeks, I'm going to be living on the streets and I'm not going to have food. Of course, our body is responding in the same way, because that is almost the equivalent of a modern day tiger, right? It makes sense when we have these incomplete pictures, how our sympathetic nervous system is getting upregulated. I'm going to put a pin in this. Do you have some?
Yeah, I wanted to go along with that vein. Our brain wanting the answers to everything, and because I was trying to look up, I actually just looked up the meaning in Latin of para to understand, and it means assistant, alongside, or beside. And it comes from Greek pair, which means like to like thoroughly, or like to get done in an efficient way. So that makes sense. I was kind of confused, like, why does it have, still have the sympathetic in it,
Yeah.
when it's the opposite of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you looked that up, because as I was saying that, I was wondering why. Yeah, and so the way I remember this, because you all know me and my learning tools, is if somebody's in their sympathetic nervous system, I'm gonna have sympathy for them. I'm gonna be like, I'm so sorry you feel so stressed out and anxious right now, and that you're running from imaginary tigers. Because I've never figured out any other way to remember it. So thank you. Para, assistant to. Yeah, and it's true, like statistically too, in the last 50 years, maybe a little bit more, we have, and specifically in Western society, have had a dramatic increase in stressors of daily life, #capitalism, that upregulates the sympathetic nervous system. Other things that might do it might be like social media, going to a yoga class. Do you know how many people I can, like, it is their first time taking a yoga class ever, and they are so anxious. And good for them for being able to work through it to still show up, but how incredibly hard it must be for them to be like, I'm terrified. I don't know any of the words that the teacher is saying. I'm in a new place. I don't know anybody. I feel like I'm making a fool out of myself. Now just relax your shoulders. I mean, like, and hopefully they do. Like, hopefully they can start to feel, this is why it's so important to be creating a welcoming environment so that people even have a shot at letting the yoga do its work, right? Because if the whole time you're just like, I don't know anybody, I'm so scared, or what's happening next, you're just not going to get anywhere.
You get a lot of that with the newbies.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where we left off. Okay, so because we are unfortunately living in a society and a lifestyle where we are constantly way more than quote unquote necessary. You all saw me this morning, so I'm all for the upregulated nervous system. I'm not, but I live in it constantly. What it can do though, if we are frequently upregulating our sympathetic nervous system is chronic stress. Long-term, and it can be immediate too, but long-term chronic stress can lead to a lot of physical and mental health concerns, decreased cognitive function, difficulty sleeping, weight imbalances, increased blood pressure and heart rate, immune system dysfunction, increased general inflammation, which then leads to a whole other host of things to go see your doctor about. Or I'm just not going to go down that rabbit hole. Chronic muscle tightness and tension, dysregulation in digestion, anxiety and depression. I could go on and on and on. Yeah.
I actually did a paper about chronic
Oh,
long-term stress.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really important with it is getting enough sleep, because after traumatic or when your sympathetic nervous system is engaged, a really important thing about I say like washing it out is getting enough sleep, because when you fall asleep and you hit the REM cycles and you hit the 3 different waves, I'm not gonna get into it. But what happens is your brain flushes everything out of, and that's how you get long-term memory, is that your brain has enough time to like, okay, these are the experiences, these are the chemicals that we released, now we're going to release that. But if you don't get enough sleep, those things build up in your brain, in your nervous system, and in your body, and they can build up. So that's why yoga is really important, is because it helps with this. It releases that tension. There's other things, of course, not just yoga, but it's the diagnosis of chronic stress has also gone up in recent years.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
Yeah. It's really rampant.
But I
It's
get
ra-
so excited.
So here we finally, all of this, y'all, all of this has been a precursor to Spine, Hips, and Surrender, which is still our focus for today. Because this leads us to, so you've got somebody who comes into yoga, and let's actually just say you come into yoga and you're all like, I just can't settle down. I can't let this go. And I'm like, all right, let's get started in Shavasana. Soften your shoulder. Like, if you try to go from one end of the spectrum to the other, it for most people is incredibly difficult, because you have this influx of adrenaline and stress hormones. You can't just be like, oh, I don't need you anymore. Bye. Like, yeah, you can't just shut it off. You have to work them out. You have to give them, you have to move your body to use them up so that then you can rest in your parasympathetic nervous system. So that brings us to the beauty of vinyasa, where we have this overarching bell curve of class, right? And we're not going to start in core, because hopefully most of your students aren't at that high of level, but we are going to work our way up there and getting the energy going up here so that we can really just be like, I'm getting this stuff out. We're going to build the heat and now direct that heat very specifically with crescents and our balance. And we're starting to bring it down a little bit now that we have expelled some of these stress hormones out of the system. Now we can get into Spine, Hips, and Surrender. This is such an important part of class. All right, I'm gonna just kind of put a pin in that for a second, okay? How long, did y'all talk this morning? How long should Spine, Hips, and Surrender be? 15 minutes, yeah. Right, because then you get 15 minutes of actual, now let's strengthen, essentially, our parasympathetic nervous system. We're not actually strengthening the nervous system, but one thing that we are toning is called the vagal nerve. It is an element of the parasympathetic nervous system, and it regulates a lot of really critical human aspects of being alive, like our heart rate, our blood pressure, our ability to sweat, our digestion, things like sneezing and swallowing, and speaking too. So that means that we can access our relaxation response through targeting and activating our vagal nerve. So when we tone, it's called toning the vagal nerve, we can reduce our stress. So this is like really practical tools to be like, cool. So like Lotus was just saying, right? You have yoga. Awesome. I think we all probably like yoga in here. Hopefully we still do. Some other things that can help tone the vagal nerve. We have belly breathing. Did you all do that have you had pranayama yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Chanting. You got it. You want to come tone your vagal nerve with me on Friday night? Prayer. Laughing. Meditation. Self-massage. Exercise, right? Like this idea, like we have to, Austin calls it running the puppy, right? Like we've got to get these wiggles out so that we can actually really settle down. Social relationships, connection, healthy diet, promoting a healthy microbiome. So anyway, all of this to say, right, like when you kind of look at this from a scientific point of view, and let's actually start sociologically, right? Like the level of stress that we have in our society from, again, I'm going back to capitalism, but a lot of things is just like so many people are just in that rat race, living paycheck to paycheck. And on top of it, getting frustrated because traffic is crazy. And on top of it, they've got an ambiguous email from their boss. And on top of it, like there's just so many layers of this stress. And so they come into yoga and we get to exert some of that and then bring it back down. And this is why it's so important to not shortchange spine, hips, and surrender. I see it happen all the time where somebody plans a really cool sequence that needed to be a 75-minute class, but guess what? It was a 60-minute class and they were really holding tight to their cool ideas. And so we do a peak pose and then they're like, so let's come on down for Shavasana. Like there's no, and then at that point, the bell curve has turned into like a bell cliff, exactly. You're just like, well, good luck settling down into Shavasana now. So that's why it's so important to, like I heard Laura say, your time management, to not be shortchanging and to make decisions earlier, right? Because if it's too late, you don't have a choice. You're like, well, crap, we gotta do Shavasana real quick. But if you catch it here and you're like, ooh, I should have already been doing eagle pose by now and I'm just now at core and crescent. What can I cut out of the series to make sure that I don't shortchange this really, really important time? There are benefits galore on all of these poses that we could be doing. But I never want it to take away from the real, not the real, but a really real benefit that's going to happen with this spine, hips, and surrender and our time in Shavasana as well.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I would be so mad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it happens.
Even though I hate Shavasana, that's like my favorite part.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a big reason why people come to yoga as opposed to a different type of workout class? Because if you just focus on the asana section and just getting the wiggles out, just building the heat, just doing the movements, it's like you could have gone to any other type of class. It's the wind down at the end. It's that intentionality where it's like, yes, this is the reason why I'm here specifically.
Yeah, because it really is so intelligent when.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have something?
I was gonna say, I'm getting the vagal nerve and the vagus nerve connected. Because the vagus nerve is connected to here, it's stimulated by
I think it might be the same thing, but
That's
now
what I
I'm
was
doubting
thinking.
myself.
I haven't heard it. I've heard it a couple times referred as the vagal nerve, just because.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. I was making sure. Thank you.
Also, I would say, to your point, traditionally yoga isn't exercise, it's vyayama is exercise. So like there's like that balance between the two that's like really important. So it's like that speaks to what you said even more. So like, you know, the Shavasana and the end of the vinyasa is so important because of that aspect that it's not really a workout at the end of the day. I mean, some people might go there for the intention of working out, but it's traditionally it's not.
And that's such a thank you, because that brings up a really good point that like all of this conversation that we're having right now is this is anatomy, right? So it's from a very anatomical, physiological point of view. When we're looking at the history and traditions of yoga, asana is used to prepare for meditation. Yeah. And we have learned from people who've spent so much time in this world, right? That who have acted as almost as scientists in saying, like, it's not like Amber and Austin. Well, I mean, they did come up with the actual Cambio sequence, but they weren't the first people to be like, here's a good vinyasa sequence. Right? Like, we have learned over such a long period of time, like what works, what doesn't. How do we get the energy? Like, do we need to get the energy up first, and all of these things, and all of basically the sages who were meditating for hours and hours and hours on end back in the day, figuring out like, oh, when I do this, I get this response. When I do this, I get this response. And just kind of seeing how they pair here and how inherently intelligent it is from a Western anatomical scientific point of view of why this bell curve works. And then remembering that this is all of asana anyways, to prepare to build the energy so that then we can actually direct it intentionally. And then we're preparing the body for meditation so that now when we still have that energy, that's basically like a little arrow that's like, okay, what am I going to focus on? Yeah, it's just cool to kind of compare and contrast. So thanks for saying that.
I was gonna say, like, to that point, when you're talking about rest and digest, I was trying to think of what it was, where we have that, like, the different kinds of, not the values, but, sattvic versus like what's the one that's for rest and digest? No, it's.
Well, sattva, so there's sattva, which is this very like peaceful,
Yeah, it's like,
and then there's
other ones with that.
rajas is that more active and fiery, and then
Which is the one that's,
tamas.
like, rest.
I mean, I would say it is sattva.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Out of
'cause I was
those
thinking about
three.
those ones with the nervous system.
Yeah. 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 I could see that. So if sattva, I'm not saying that super well with my Sanskrit, it's more like sattva, is here at the end of class when we're just kind of in this like, okay, like everything just kind of makes sense. Rajas is almost like Tigger, where it's just like, I'm ready to go. And then we got that Rajas up here and this more energetic part of class. And then sometimes, depending on how people are coming in, but even this is really helpful for people who are really tamasic, that very like Eeyore, like tired, slow, heavy, lethargic, stubborn, not wanting to do. And it's easy to kind of get this tamas and the sattva conflated because they can both be really slow, but one of them has a real clarity to it, whereas one of them has this almost like lethargic, like almost like unhealthy, sluggish. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about a couple of poses. Look at this, we do have time. From spine, hips, and surrender. We're not going to do breakout groups because we've only got 30 minutes. Okay, triangle, camel, locust, forward, fold. I do want us to look at, okay, so we're totally shifting gears now. Does anybody have any last comments or questions before we do so? Yeah.
I have a book recommendation.
Oh, great.
It's
Let's hear
called
it.
The Joy of Living.
Oh, the joy of living.
But I always mispronounce his name. I apologize for this, but Younger Rinpoche. But the first 3 chapters, which I've read, the rest of it I've not. It's taken me 3 years to get through this book. I don't know why. But the main things that he talks about is that he grew up with the traditional kind of monk education, and then as he grew older, he had the Western psychology education. So he's been really able to pair this traditional long time history with the more recent Western psychology and how interconnected they are. Like an example of this is in Tibetan tradition, like there's the ground of like where they build up stuff and like does this do this, and then in ours we have the hypothesis, and they're very similar. Which I'm definitely exaggerating this. It's not exactly the same. Read the book, but they're very similar. It's super cool.
That's awesome.
Can I say something too?
Please.
So, I've been following the Sattvic yoga movement, and one of the people on there, her name's Radhika, and she actually was the opposite. She started out with a psychological background, and then she got breast cancer, and she was told by the doctor she was only going to live for a few more months. And she said to herself, "I'm not going to let this hold me back. I'm gonna heal from this." And so she radically changed her life, her diet, her lifestyle, and she became a yogi. And whereas before she said she was living an unhealthy lifestyle, and then now she's kind of like the opposite of that guy's story, where she used to be in the academic realm and a psychologist, and then now she's completely yogi. So that's cool. And she left behind the psychology, but she talks about psychology a lot along with yoga. She's like, this is what we call this in psychology. So
Yeah, it's cool to see. Yeah, essentially I want to say philosophy, but the inner workings of yoga and some of the philosophy, like, being proven, and seeing, basically sometimes we're just saying the same thing but speaking different languages. So in different times. What do you mean?
Freud compared to now.
Oh, yeah, and just like how it's evolved over different understandings. Okay. All right. Cool. Poses. Yes. Let's do it for a little bit. We a couple of weeks ago we talked about why do we flex the foot in figure 4 and lizard lunge, things like that.
The knee joint.
To protect the knee joint and the ankle, but a lot to do with the knee here. And so just as a recap, because we touched on it briefly that day, so we've got, I'm gonna really simplify this for my sake. The upper leg bone and the lower leg bone, right? Our lower leg bone, thank you. At the top of it is shaped like a triangle. So it's triangle, so it's wider at the top and then it gets smaller as it comes down. We've got a couple different bones going on down here. So when we flex the foot where we've got this like 90-degree angle happening, it's going to keep these muscles where we have basically bone compression happening in the ankle here. It's going to lock those bones in place so that they can't slip and slide around in there. So same thing when we're talking about half pigeon, right? If you come into half pigeon and you are somebody who has your shin parallel to the front of your mat, and I'm doing this standing because that's not going to happen in half pigeon, then you're going to want to flex the foot again to keep all the things in place so that it doesn't track up and start to tweak things in the knee. The opposite of that would be pointing the toe. If the toes are more in toward the groin, because now we actually want to create the space so that those bones can slide further down the leg so that all of this can be tracking as one unit. So just a reminder with that for half pigeon. Did you all talk about locust? Let's talk about, did you talk about this with Caleb? The reason why you have the palms up versus down in locust pose. Let's, let's come on down to, let's lay down in a prone position, pouring out that soup. You're ready. How long have you been there? All day. Okay. Now, take your feet a little bit apart from one another, hands by your hips. And let's roll palms up toward the sky. And take a moment here, pay attention to what the shoulders are doing. Yeah, now, flip your palms down toward the ground and see if you can feel it'll probably be pretty subtle at this point, how that impacts the shoulder. And now just kind of flop back and forth a little bit. I'm seeing it in some of you. Yeah. Now, rest with the palms up toward the sky. And let's do a little light locust pose. Hey, remember, you're doing this cold. This is not at the end after 45 minutes of yoga, right? So you're going to approach it a little bit differently than maybe you would in a vinyasa class. Okay, so as you inhale, lift up heart, head, and hands. Palms are facing the sky. Notice what the collarbones are doing. And release. Now flip the palms down toward the ground. Feel the tips of the shoulder blades squeeze toward one another a little bit. And now lift up, locust pose. You feel more opening here through the collarbones. Okay, come on down. Take a moment, windshield wiper, the knees side to side. And when you're ready, push yourself up to a seat. Okay. So, who can tell me what they felt?
Chest is more open when the palms are down.
Chest are more open when the palms are down. Yeah, and because, as we've talked about ad nauseum today, that we need this action happening as much as possible, however gentle or not it may be, right? We want to maximize that potential every time we get. So, somebody gonna hurt themselves if they come into locust pose with the palms up? No, but we can certainly maybe get a little bit more of that back spine strengthening and heart opening out of it.
Wait, so the palms are facing down?
Yeah.
Yes.
So does this help to look at my shoulder here versus this? This would be, so if the floor were right here, this would be palms up.
So your hand looks up.
Palm up, palm down.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That was incorrect.
That's okay.
Like hips this way.
Yeah, so in some body, safety cue here, yes, you want some distance in between the feet. Some bodies might be able to have the feet together, but it can put a lot of torque. That was the word I was looking for like 2 hours ago. It can put a lot of torque and pressure on the low spine and the sacrum to have the legs together and to be exerting like that. And you can say hip width distance. Honestly, it can be wider. If hip width distance is still creating any type of tension in that area, take them wider. And that's another one, that deepest expression of the pose, where I've had people be like, okay, cool. It's basically like wheel on the forearms, but then your legs are straight. And I can get into it and I love it, but I have to have a lot of distance between my feet. And I had a teacher who was like, no, you can bring your toes to touch. And I'm like, absolutely not. I mean, maybe I could, but like, I know what that feels like in my body. And I already have a plethora of low back and SI stuff going on. Like, I do not need, I promise you, it's not going to make this any better. No balloons are going to fall from the ceiling. So anyway, same thing in locust pose. Absolutely, as much distance between the feet as you want. Okay. Thank you all for putting up with me. Let's also play around with this adjustment in locust pose. So does anybody want to come receive an adjustment? Sorry, I pointed at you because I thought you were raising your hand. I'm not like.
No, me. I was scratching my head.
Yeah, you don't have to. You can go back.
No, I actually wanted to.
Okay. All right.
Getting into it now.
We'll flip your palms down first. Find some distance between your feet. Is that blanket okay, or do you want more padding?
I mean, it's fine. Yeah, no, this is
For
perfect.
sure.
I was thinking, I'm like my knees, but I'm not gonna be pressing in my knees. So.
Okay. All right. So inhale, locust pose. Let's start head and hands. Yes, option to fly the legs as well. Do you like your feet together, or do you want space in between them?
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
I
So
just
right.
naturally bring it together like this. Like,
Okay.
I don't even know.
So I've got midline to midline and right hand to the low back. And now if the goal here is to help find length, there's two that look at how much you, whoa, I was not expecting that. Okay, so come on down, take a moment, you can bring your cheeks to the floor. I'm just gonna,
I'm pretty warm.
I don't wanna
I've been-
overtap you.
No,
You really, yeah, I was like, so that was glorious. Thank you for demonstrating my point so well. Normally you do not see that much more of a lift from that adjustment, but you will see, it may not look like that, but that's what they're feeling. They're like, that scene in Titanic, you know, it's like, I'm here, like, it's just this like huge opening.
You're Jack and
What sometimes happens, when we come back into it, and I'm not gonna be too aggressive with this because I don't expect it to feel great. I don't expect it to be like awful though either, but please tell me if it is. So sometimes people get confused. So what I did there is I put my hands here, low back, and I'm pressing down and I'm pulling back, and that back motion is really what's allowing this to happen. We're gonna come back to a neutral, okay? Sometimes people push down and push forward. Did you see it? You can come out of it now because I don't wanna do more. Did you see how his whole body weight pushed forward, right? So we are doing the opposites from what you want happening when you press forward in this shape. So by pressing down, I'm creating the something for Jacob to press against, and then by pulling back, it's almost counterintuitive, but it's helping him find that axial extension and the spinal extension. It's similar. Can I have you come into child's pose? Because this is an adjustment I got recently.
Mukha Virasana, like this or like this?
The first one.
Okay.
I've never heard that Sanskrit before. Same thing here. If we're looking to create length in the spine, axial extension, right? I'm going to press down and I'm going to pull back. Because if his forehead is grounding the top of his spine over there, I am creating traction by pulling backwards. I recently had an adjustment where somebody pressed forward, and you can almost imagine, and I'm not really going to do it, so you can come out whenever, right? It's like if his forehead is grounding the top of the spine here, I am compressing the spine. Yeah, right. So whenever we're looking for that length in these prone poses, right, this pulling back.
How does that, I didn't see how it looked.
Yeah.
How does that look when you're doing the adjustment for child's pose? It's like you're pressing down this way or?
So does anybody else wanna?
We're the old one.
Yeah. Down and right, a lot of our adjustments have 2 points of direction, so pressing down and then pulling back, as opposed to pressing down and pushing forward.
And you said you received an adjustment that was like that?
Yeah, they press down and push forward, and I was like, what is your goal here? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was really short. And spine hips and surrender, we are ripe for spine strengthening and heart opening at this point because the body is so warm.
I had a question similar about legs, but about other poses. For me, because I've sat a lot in my life, I know that you have very tight like right here. And so when I do locust pose, I kind of focus on that a little bit by pushing my stomach into the ground to feel like a slight sensation there. Not a lot.
So are you trying to focus more on the hip extension?
Yeah, just because they're very tight for me. And like when I'm in like Warrior 2 and I'm like fully in Warrior 2,
Yeah.
They're a little stinky. I don't know, they're just not happy. So, I was wondering for the other poses in spine hips and stuff, is there anything else that focuses on that?
Yes, and there's one that's actually kind of, I think, kind of sneaky, and that is pigeon. So a lot of what comes to mind when you think pigeon is front hip,
Yeah.
right? It's like inner thigh right here. So, and again, you get to negotiate what you want out of these poses. So if I'm surrendering here, that's where I'm feeling that sensation because of how I change the direction of my torso to impact the sensation here. If I stay lifted, and I'm actually going to lift my hips a little bit because I'm not open, and even if I weren't, if I work on bringing my torso back,
That's
right here, yeah, yeah,
That's still pigeon.
that's still
And
pigeon.
you
Yeah.
could put like a blanket.
It might be like technically the posture may be different, but
Technically, when you like fall down, that's an entirely different pose. That's sleeping pigeon. So upright is pigeon.
I mean, I wouldn't call it entirely different.
it's-
It's just a variation. Yeah, because you've got this, you could be here, you could do like the mermaid.
What makes it half pigeon versus full?
Oh, full pigeon is a completely different pose, and I'm so glad you asked. I have to Google it because I've never even met anybody who can do this shape, and it's not at all. It doesn't even look remotely like what we think of as half pigeon. I usually have to. I should just save this image on my computer. While I'm finding this, was there something else?
I know that there's a variation of locust where people bring their arms out in front of them. Is there any harm in adding that to the sequence?
Oh, yeah, so that's almost like I would say like a Spider-Man. It's almost like, well, it's like we talked about briefly with Warrior 3, where it's like that is, Warrior 3 is a hefty pose, and doing locust with your arms out in front of you is a hefty pose as well, because now you're, like how we talked about, if the head is forward, how much pressure it adds to the spine. It's like that, like you're just like, all right, now I'm also putting all of the weight on my arms into strengthening the back as well. So if you're going to put it into your sequence, I would say it definitely needs, it can't just be the normal cambio sequence, nothing changed, no special focus, and then you throw it in there. It's definitely something to work up to, maybe with like here would be a nice like in between to do at different points throughout the class where it's like, it's not here, but it's not here. It's somewhere in the middle where it's like you're adding a little bit of weight and also offering these up as different options that we talked about earlier. Maybe you do this, maybe you do this, maybe you do this. If that takes you a while back, come back to this. Neither better worse than the other, just different options. Yeah, good question.
Do you have any safety cues for pigeon in this variation?
When you have your hips up, I would say to really press into your front shin and then squeeze your inner thighs together like you're trying to scrunch the mat up under your heel.
That was a good expression.
Those are going to really engage the musculature around the hips. Yes.
This is very nice, and I can tell it needed this. I know. Amazing.
This is, I have no idea how they came up with these names because I'll just come around to all of you. This is full pigeon. What?
Oh
my
my
gosh.
Pigeon look like that.
Not at all.
Is it
related to
really?
that.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's like its egg pose.
A lot of times
That
you
reminds me of a
say,
wheel.
Like the full
King
expression of
pigeon?
pigeon is right towards the line.
yeah, king pigeon or full pigeon. A lot of times people will think, I'll just,
The one like that.
yeah, like that mermaid variation, but this is what I know of as actual, like,
So what we do is half pigeon.
yeah, half pigeon. No idea how those are remotely
Yeah.
related.
That's kind of annoying to me, actually.
Yeah, that almost looks closer to wheel.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
looks
it's
like a
wheel
wheel
on your
variation
forearms
and on your
shins.
shin.
Yeah, ouch, yeah. I mean, I had to
Ouch,
scroll,
yeah.
I had to scroll way down to find it. Okay. Focus, pigeon.
Thank you for showing me that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just pose a question, and then I think this will be it, for time's sake, since we're almost there. But let me just pose this question that in your seated forward pose, right, you do locust pose, and then you're like, all right, come on up to a seat, let's set up for, actually, Sanskrit is falling out of my head. Paschimottanasana. What are your thoughts on finding axial extension before moving into this and keeping a little bit of spinal extension and shoulder retraction versus rounding over, finding more spinal flexion and softness in the pose? Why don't you? Different purposes.
Yeah, I think it's like not one or the other, it's just kind of whatever the person wants.
Have you all felt it out?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If
Maybe
you haven't, you can, but
if it's in the morning, you would want to have the spinal flexion.
extension.
Spinal extension, and then if it's like a night class, you want
Hmm.
to wind down and.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Now is so these are all great answers, right? It depends. Basically, it could go either way. And that is true. What do we already get of a lot in this movement? Yeah, this like rounding over. So if it provides the sensation that you want in the low back and the legs to do that, that may be something that you're willing to sacrifice. Otherwise, we can always use more of the spine strengthening and the heart opening when given the opportunity. Again, neither is right or wrong, they're just different options.
Well, also to Jacob's point, it's kind of like the energy of when we talked about it, some other point, but like this, when you're compressing all these internal organs, like that's drawing all this energy in versus if you're like really focusing on centering energy through the crown, like you're gonna want to find that, be like focused on still finding that.
Yeah. You could do both. You could do more active and then more like this reflectiveness that it offers. Okay. Any last questions? Let me say this, there are a million things that we did not talk about in here. I mean, we could do a whole 200-hour training on down dog alone. So while you're thinking of any last questions, my advice to you is to make sure, and you're going to talk about this as you get further into sequencing too, but like to make sure that as you learn other poses that aren't in the Cambio sequence, to be doing your due diligence to understand what needs to be warmed up, what needs to be done after to help kind of come back into, neutralize, thank you. And also, even when you hear cues from other teachers and those poses or these poses that you've already learned, if it's something that you're like, oh, that's interesting, I haven't heard that before. If there's any, I mean, sometimes it's like, oh, you're obviously saying the same thing just in different words. But like, if you're like, oh, I've never heard that concept before, like look into it before blindly repeating it. I have had teachers that I really trusted who have said stuff that I repeated, and Amber was like, so by the way, I was like, did not do my due diligence. Yeah, and don't forget that you've also got, if you're into this stuff, those anatomy videos from Erica too, which is going to go a lot more in depth into a lot of these concepts that we've talked about over the weeks, and also some concepts that we didn't, like a lot of like bones and muscles, and I'm obviously like upper leg, lower leg, tibia and fibia, I do know that. Femur, I mean, I do know more, but also sometimes it's just like, right, like we just need to talk about the concepts. So, but questions?
I still have a question with locus, or just like a point to pick up. But we were talking a lot about spine for that one, but for that one, I do notice like just with how I am as a person, I really feel my hip bones, the top of my hip bones pressing in. And so I feel like that adjustment, like I do like it, I do find it very helpful, but depending on how people do it, like it can feel really weird on the hip bones, and I don't know if other people felt up, but I just think when you're teaching, it's important to remember that like it's a bony, it can be really bony and very uncomfortable if somebody's pressing like on the front side, not just the spine side. So.
Yeah, blanket, I would say.
Yeah.
Would be your best friend there. Yeah, that's such a great point.
I would say that, Erica, when you did the adjustment, you were hardly doing any weight, like putting.
Yeah, yeah.
weight,
That's
and
crazy.
it's just like, I lifted up. pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like you don't always need a whole lot of weight adjustment.
Oh, okay.
There's like
Yeah.
more the force going back versus the force going down
Oh,
into the ground.
This will probably get you more than
The back than.
Yeah, and that's what we saw too. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, because it's like when I pressed down, like Jacob moved a little bit. But when I pulled back,
Yeah.
Jacob was like, "Hello."
Lucas.
Well, you
I'm
already.
really proud of you guys today.
Oh,
Nah, I'm serious. We powered through this one.
you did great.
Nah, we did though, for real. I hope you guys like treat yourself to a nice meal tonight. I'm really happy with
You
it.
gonna come cook it? Yeah.
Listen, if I were, I actually like wanna do something like that, but I don't want a single person not to be there.
That you come cook at my house and everybody can eat outside.
Like, I'm dead serious, like, I'm not cooking to one person's listen, like, that's why I haven't even thought.
You're like, oh, we're not always, sorry,
Yes. But I don't wanna somebody to be like, I've got plans here, they're like, nah, then I'm not doing it.
I will
Like,
say-
it's either everybody's there or not.
A lot of people do graduation potluck.
That's a good
Afterwards, if you
idea.
want to. I would also love, and this is selfish of me because I coordinate the extended program, but we will have people from extended teaching out that day. If you want to, like, if you do coordinate something like that and want to invite them, let me know and I can post it in their classroom, so that they can also, yeah. So, all right. You already did the word with Laura. So,
Yeah. She jumped the gun on that one.
yeah. So I mean, we can do it again.
No
You all look like you want to go. So.
No way.
All right. Love you all. I will see you.
Run away.
Hey, really quick, I posted something in the classroom for next Sunday's stuff. Please take a look at it. Your mentors are also gonna remind you to take a look at it.
That's a diversity.
Yeah, and then there's some stuff for the morning too. So I'll see you then, and then
Thank you.
I'll see you teach out. But great job, everybody.
Thank you. And I love
This is one of those days I wish it was like an extra 30 minutes in class.